How's everybody today? Everybody's good?
We're standing up.
Okay,
We're
good.
sitting down right now.
Well, quiet crowd. Everybody ready for Easter?
Yes. Yes.
Any major plans for Easter?
Not yet. Here at the church service.
Here she comes.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Miss Ann.
Can't you just sit?
No.
Thank you.
I need to change.
All right. How did you see God this week?
Well,
Start off with the same thing we always do.
Well, I can tell you one thing, we saw God. We were going to my birthday dinner, and as we were going down the main highway, and it was turns, and Rayler is such a good driver, and just very cautious and everything. But we were going, and this guy pulled across the road right in front of us, and then right behind him was another car. And if Rayler hadn't been alert and the way he was, there was an accident waiting so terrible. And I just said, thank God God was just with us right there. But I don't know if Gina said it was young kids driving, and evidently they were following each other.
Oh,
And
yeah.
when he turned, the other one turned to, it just right in front of us, and it was like a hair that he came to a screeching slow, but it was just like you felt like you could put a hand between us. And I tell you, if that's not God, that.
Yep. We should always see God and things, especially things like that, but we should always see him anyway. But
Yeah, that.
like the Bible talks about, we should be grateful at all the time.
Yeah.
Attitude of thankfulness and gratitude. Anybody else? Okay.
This is kind of a personal thing, but it just really touched my heart this week. My daughter called, she had just picked the two youngest up from school, and she said they got in the car and said they wanted to go visit Mimi. And that just, we see them fairly often, but for them to request to come and see them meant a lot to me.
That's
That is
sweet.
Okay. Well, we'll pick up where we were. All right. Right now we're in the journey of Jacob as he travels. Remember, him and his brother got into it because he stole his birthright and he stole his blessing. And Esau basically made it obvious that he was going to kill him as soon as his dad wasn't there anymore, because his dad loved him so much. And his dad loved him and his mom loved Jacob. And so he was like, when he's gone, I'm going to kill you for what you did. And so she sends Jacob to her brother Laban back in Haran, where they're from, where their family ended up settling. And he goes back there, and remember, Laban was not very honest with Jacob. He told him he could have his daughter if he served him 7 years, but he gave him the wrong daughter on purpose so that he would have to serve him again. And then he gave her after a week. Then he had to stay 7 more years. So we're gonna pick up in the historical account where Jacob has served all that time, and he's there now, and he's pretty much probably. I'm not speaking for him, but I think he's had enough of Laban and his, trickery and dishonesty. But once again, what have we seen the whole time? All these people have been lying to each other. They've been doing stuff behind each other's back. Somebody favors somebody else more than the other person. And these are God's people. These are considered the people of the area who are believers. Yet, like I said, we see dishonesty, we see fighting, we see death threats, we see all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's proof even back then we need Jesus, right? Because these people followed God like we do, and there's still things that are going on in their life that are just not godly. Morning, Miss Francis.
Good morning. Running all over her feet. I'm okay.
Morning, Mr. Donald.
Just lost the tools.
toe.
Sorry to be late.
You're okay.
Fine.
No, a bit tough.
So we're going to pick up where Jacob is still there, but God has a message, okay? Because the Lord has come to him with several messages about what he needs to do, when he needs to do it. And so we're going to pick up in Genesis chapter 31. All right, the first thing we're doing is verse 3. Oops. Then the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you. And that's such a similar message. Your family, your kindred. And so, think about that. Jacob has been here. Jacob has been here for, it's been like 20 years, I think, since the original message about, because he's getting the same message from the Lord too. The Abrahamic covenant. Remember, through you, all people will be blessed. And your descendants will be as numerous as the stars of the sky, as the sand of the seashore, all that stuff, which is, obviously we can't count those things. So it's going to be a lot. And so Jacob is here, and God is now telling him this message. So he's been here serving Laban. We know he's served him for 14 years, right? Because he's got 2 wives. But then, remember, they did the same thing their parents did. And he told him to have, his wives told him to have children with their servants. So now they've got children with the servants. So they've got 2 servants with children. They have the 2 mothers or his 2 wives with children. So now he's got all these people with children. And so this is like his whole camp. And now he's accumulated all this stuff. So we also see God's blessing. Because he went there with nothing. Remember, he was sleeping on that rock, and we're like, who sleeps on a rock in the desert? Well, he didn't have anything. So he slept on a rock. And on this side of the journey, he has all this stuff now. He's got a huge family, and he's got, remember the 12 tribes of Israel? So those are all of his sons. And we also have all this stuff that he's accumulated as he's worked for Laban for 14 years. And even extra, because Laban's always conniving a way to keep Jacob at work. And Jacob was successful because the Lord gave him success because he's blessed, because he's a follower of Christ, or he's a follower of God at this point. I can't say Christ, but Jesus, the pre-incarnate Christ, has come to him, and we're gonna see that today. All right. So next we're gonna move to 32, 3 through 8. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau and his brother in the land of Seir, the country of Edom, instructing them, thus shall you say to my lord Esau, thus says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, male servants, and female servants. I have sent to tell my lord in order that I may find favor in your sight. All right, so now God just told him to go back. All right, but he's not dumb. He's not just going to go back, right? Because remember, his brother said, I'm going to kill you. So he's going back in a very planned out, careful manner, which makes sense, right? Because he's still fearful of his life, or for his life. And messengers returned to Jacob saying, we came to your brother Esau and he's coming to meet you. And there were 400 men with him. All right, so so he's got a trained army with him. All right, so right now, we can see where Jacob's going to be a little nervous, right? Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. He divided the people who were with him and the flocks and the herds and the camels into 2 camps, thinking, if Esau comes to the one camp and attacks it, then the camp that is left will escape. All right, so we can see his plan formulating here. He's thinking, all right, if my brother tries to kill me, or whichever side, at least part of my family will get away. Now, again, what did God tell him? You're going to be numerous, right? You're going to have all these. Okay, so he's not going to kill his family because God said his family's not going to be killed, or else the covenant doesn't stand, right? But this is where we see worldly circumstances that confound our belief in what God told us.
And in verse 31, he says, I will be with you. But even though God told him he was going to be with him, he's making all these plans to make sure nothing goes wrong. And I think we do that a lot. Like, we know God's going to find a way out, but then we just make plans in case something goes wrong.
And I mean, like we said, he's only human. He's scared, and he thinks, my brother's crazy. He could kill me. I mean, he was a hunter, remember? He was the red hairy one who was out in the woods all the time. So he's like, I'm not putting it past him to kill me. But like Lauren made a good point, though. If God said he's got you, who you think's going to protect you better than God? All right. 9 through 12. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and to your kindred, that I may do you good. I am not worthy of the least of all deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown to your servant. For only my staff I crossed with, for with only my staff I crossed this Jordan. So remember, he had nothing. And now I have become two camps. So like we said, and we just saw the things that he was telling him. I've got all this stuff that he's worked, and he worked hard for all this stuff too. Now God did bless him as he was working, but he did work hard for all that. I mean, that's a lot of years and a lot of, and the Bible was very clear about why Laban wanted him to stay there, because he was very good at what he was doing with the animals and the flocks and all that, and multiplication and feeding them and growing them. And so it was making Laban rich as well. So he did earn his money, but like I said, he doesn't get in that position unless God puts him in that position. And God gave him a lot of favor throughout that. Please deliver me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he may come attack me and the mothers with children. But you said, I will surely do you good and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So it's funny because it's like he's trying to give himself a pep talk, and you're like, well, do you trust God or not? He's like, God, I'm fearful. I'm scared of my brother. But at the same time, you're the one that told me I'd be okay. So can you please make sure I'm okay? Even though I'm kind of planning anyway in case you don't protect me. So it's funny because it's like he's having this internal battle right now. I trust God, but I kind of don't trust God, you know?
But I think we've all been there before. You do trust God, but then you start working your way into a backup plan. Because I don't think it's that we don't trust God. It's just we know that he might not work things out the way we want them. And so then we have to surrender to his ways instead of ours. And that's really hard sometimes.
So he stayed there that night. And from what he had with him, he took a present for his brother Esau. 200 female goats, 21 male goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milking camels and their calves, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. That's a gift. That's not what he had. That was just what he was giving. That's a lot. And I don't even know anything about farming. I mean, but that seems like a lot. These he handed over to his servants. Every drove by himself. And he said to his servants, pass on ahead of me and put space between drove and drove. So he's got them going in sections. He instructed first, when Esau, my brother, meets you and asks you, to whom do you belong? Where are you going? And whose are these ahead of you? Then you shall say, they belong to your servant Jacob. They are present to my Lord, sent to my Lord Esau. And moreover, he is behind us. He likewise instructed the second and the third, and all who followed the droves. You shall say the same thing to Esau when you find him. And you shall say, moreover, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he thought, I may appease him with the presents that go ahead of me, and afterward I shall see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. So the presents passed ahead of him, and he himself stayed that night in the camp. So now he's on to flattery and gifts. And he's got like 3 rounds of gifts coming through to him. And then each time he wants them to say, okay, here's your gifts and he's coming. Here's your gifts and he's coming. Here's your gifts and he's coming. And you're like, okay, he gets it, you're coming. But at the same time, he wants each time for him to be less and less angry about what he did before. You know, stealing his birthright, stealing his blessing. And he figures if I just continue to give him more stuff and remind him that I'm on my way, he won't be quick to kill me when he sees me. So again, I feel like we're looking at the same thing in the sense that he's trusting God to protect him, but he's kind of not. Because he's doing a whole lot here. This is a whole lot of stuff happening, preparation, and really it's just, isn't it human action? Like, you know, we're supposed to trust God, but he's doing a whole lot. This is a lot of preparation. Now, I don't, excuse me, I don't know in the sense of like, we do the same thing, right? Like when God asks you to do something, we get confused about how much action is ours and how much action is God's. And that's kind of what we see here, because I feel like Jacob's like, if I just walk up to him, he might kill me. I don't know if God's got it that good, you know? But at the same time, I know there's steps we should take. Have you ever been caught on that before? On the fence of like, if I trust God, I can't just sit here. But at the same time, I don't want to overstep my boundaries. I don't want to get ahead of God, right? But God is not like the kind of God who's like, you want a job? Well, go sit on the couch. It's like, I want a job. I got to fill out an application. I have to go out and interview, right? You can't just sit there and expect God to do it for you. But you also don't want to get ahead of God to the point where you're forcing things to happen and it's not God, it's you. And I feel like it's really difficult in life to find that balance. I don't know. Y'all look like you don't ever have that problem. You're looking at me like, no, I've never had that happen. I mean,
Well, I think too, like in this situation, it probably cost Jacob a lot unnecessarily. If God didn't tell him to send all those gifts to Esau, he's just giving his stuff away for no reason, basically, and he could have kept it. So I think sometimes our decisions, while it doesn't harm him, because he clearly had plenty of stuff, but it could have been unnecessary that he lost all those things for no reason, because God didn't tell him to do that. God said, I'll be with you. And so I think sometimes God allows us to do things that he's like, I mean, you can do that. It's not necessary. And then we cost ourselves things that we just didn't need to give up. Because it's hard to trust God a lot of times. It sounds good. It sounds easy. But when you're looking at your circumstances and you see, you know, he's got 400 men with him. Well, why would he have 400 men just traveling around with him?
to come meet his brother, right?
To go meet his brother. I mean, obviously, like, he's going to try to kill me. So you go into protection mode. And all the while, you're like, I know God will protect me. I'm going to send all these gifts to help out. And that's what we've seen over and over in Genesis. Helping God do what God's trying to do. He doesn't need our help. He needs our obedience. And so, you know, I think we see in this, Jacob just lost probably a bunch of animals that he didn't need to lose. He could have kept.
So the next thing he does is he sends his family across this brook and he camps by himself. Okay, so now he's alone. And I don't know if he was, you know, maybe he needed a moment to kind of process all this and figure it out. Maybe he wanted to pray, meditate. I don't know. But it tells us he sent them across and everything else he had. So whatever was left from all the madness that he sent toward his brother, he sent that across ahead of him, and he's back here by himself camping. And Jacob was left alone, and the man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day has broken." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said to Jacob, and he said, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and prevailed." All right, so if we pause there, this is another pre-incarnate Christ. Okay? Because no one's seen God, correct? No one's the Father, excuse me. But we have seen Jesus show up several times as the angel of the Lord. You can see Jesus, okay? Later he comes incarnate in the sense of we see him as a man, Jesus the Christ, in flesh. But before we see Jesus in flesh, we have these what are called Christophanies or theophanies. It's sightings of Jesus before he became flesh. Okay, so we see the Son of God. The Spirit of God moves. No one sees the Father. All right, so we see this has to be Jesus. All right, number one, who has authority to change your name but God? Number two, he's wrestling with him, but notice it's like Jesus is play wrestling with him, of course, because Jesus would always win. And when Jesus decides that this guy's not going to give up, he touches. Now, he didn't grab him and dislocate his hip. He touched him and dislocated his hip. Who has that kind of power, right? So, what did Jesus ask him? What is your name? He reminded him who he was. Jacob, the deceiver. Okay? All these years you've been deceiving people. You've been living this life of deception. He said, I'm changing you right now. You have encountered me face to face, okay? When you encounter Jesus, do you change? It's not a trick question. When you encounter Jesus, the answer is yes, you change. You go from dead to alive, right? Remember, if you don't know Jesus, you're dead. I don't care if you look like you're alive, you're dead. Correct? We on the same page? Because you're going to hell. That's death. But if you know Jesus, and more importantly, if Jesus knows you, you're alive. Remember, you were born again spiritually. We're not talking physical here. Spiritually, you're born again. And so if you know Jesus and Jesus knows you, you're not the same. You're different. Same thing happens here. Okay, Jesus hasn't come yet in the sense of what we're talking about, what we experience. But this here is a change in Jacob's life. He asked him his name to remind him that he's a deceiver. And then after he asked him his name, he said, I'm changing your name to one who wrestled with God, Israel. So he changes his name to represent the new Jacob, the changed Jacob after the encounter with Jesus, the pre-incarnate Christ that we know. Now, Jacob is saying, I will not let you go and let you bless me. So he wrestled with God, but he also didn't give up. He's like, I don't care what you do to me. I'm not leaving till I get you, till you bless me. So that's somebody who's after Christ. That's somebody who wants God. He didn't care what it cost him. He was going to wrestle with him until he won. Jesus let him win. And then he dislocated his hip. So he remembered who won. All right? The rest of his life, he's going to have a limp. But do you think he's going to remember what happened? He's going to remember he wrestled with God. Now, his name was changed and his life was changed, but he will remember what happened to him. So we'll pick up, he says, for you have striven with God and men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. Oh, so Jacob's asking him his name now. Then Jacob asked him, please tell me your name. But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And then he blessed him. So he didn't answer him. And once again, God doesn't have to answer you or me or Jacob or anybody. I'm doing what I'm doing because this is my plan. I don't answer to people. People answer to me, is the point. So Jacob called the name of that place Peniel, saying, for I have seen God's face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. And so Jacob recognizes, I just wrestled with God, and I'm still alive. And that's why he named the place. Remember, all these names matter. Everybody's name matters as far as personal pronoun or whatever you want to say, but also the names of these places. They matter. They're named something because of what happened there. The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh, that is on the hip socket because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh. So the Israelites, which are, who do they come from? Jacob, remember? The 12 tribes of Israel, the nation of Israel from Jacob. 12 tribes are the 12 sons. And so the Israelites, which are God's people, which are the ones that were as numerous as the sea of the sand, or of the seashore, will be the ones that follow that, and many other things that God brings into practice too, as we see in Leviticus, when God gives us all the rules. So that's a lot. I mean, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the story of him wrestling with God, but there's a lot to that story. There's a lot of meaning in there. But you can see how the things that are happening here represent all we see with the Jews or the Hebrews or the Israelites or whatever you want to call them. It's the same group of people, but we see some of their issues down the road because of these things that happen through their parents and their grandparents. Remember generational sin? And we saw generational sin with starting with Abraham and then Isaac and then Jacob. We see each of them doing the same things, having children with their maidservants, not trusting God, going out ahead of God, forcing the issue when God didn't say to do it yet, all those things. And it really happens through the people too, because we saw the Israelites, were they obedient to God? Did they follow what God said all the time? They worshiped idols. They didn't take the people out of the land. Half of them didn't even make it to the promised land because they didn't do what God said in the wilderness. A 2-week trip turned into 40 years. The whole generation had to die before they could go into the promised land. Then when they got there, the people that were supposed to be the good people that made it didn't do what God said, and now they're worshiping idols, and he has to send other, the Persians and the Babylonians and the Syrians in there to conquer them because they need to experience God's wrath for their disobedience. See how that is just it's a constant cycle. Our job as parents is to break these cycles. Hopefully with your children, there were things that may have been done in your family that you stopped and you changed because it's a generational curse or a generational sin. And you decided it stops here with me. I know there's things in my life that my parents did with us that I'm not saying it was their fault because maybe they didn't know any better. Ignorance is not an excuse. But we've made decisions in our life that we're doing this and we're not doing that because this is what the Bible says and we're going to honor God. That's getting rid of generational sin, because when you're not following what God said to do, you're sinning. Sin is anything that offends God. It doesn't have to be a 10 commandment. There's a lot of things that offend God. Those are the main ones that make it obvious for us. But when you look at things that dishonor God, that's sin. What's the verse you always tell the kids? To him who knows it is sin? Or what?
Yeah. Well, I tell them a lot. To know better is to do better. So once you know better based on scripture, you do better, and it changes your life. And like you said, it changes your children's lives, because as you all know, you've raised children and grandchildren, and they're watching you. And I think being a parent, the hardest thing of being a parent is watching your kid do things that you're like, they got that from me. And they watched me do that. I say that. And then when they say it, you're like, oh, I can't believe you're saying that. And then you're like, I say that. And the conviction you feel as a parent, because they're constantly watching on how to live and how to make decisions. And we're all making mistakes. We'll never be perfect. But once God convicts you of something, to make that change and let your children watch you change is so much better than just sweeping it under the rug and moving on. Because, there's mistakes already. Our kids aren't even that old that we're like, oh, yeah, we caused that, so we have to work to fix it. And that's what we're seeing here, just the repetition of sin over and over. And you think, of course the world we live in today looks like it does. This was thousands of years ago, and sometimes that cycle doesn't get broken. And it goes on and on and on. And that's why, when you get to Deuteronomy over and over, take the law and pass it down to your children. And then we see in Judges, there was a generation who did not know the Lord. Well, where do you think the people that are alive today who don't know the Lord, if an entire generation didn't know the Lord then, it's only going to grow. And so it's our job to take this word and pass it down to our children. And then trust God I pray a lot for God to protect my kids from the things that I have not fixed, because he can do that. He can blind them from my sin, and he has the ability to do things that as their mom I can't do. And so, it's nice when we're seeing these moments of change. Like Jacob has now given up, and he's like, okay, and God changed his name to be his people, Israel. Like, he is Israel, and that's God's people, and all of God's nation comes from him. That's amazing.
And just like she talked about, we look at people groups and say, well, it's not fair. Everybody hasn't heard the gospel. People say that, and that's not true. To the point she just made, the people that the lines they came from heard the gospel and rejected it. And then they forgot about God. And then years later, their kids don't know about God. Guess what? Children will be accountable at times for what their parents did. If I teach my kids the wrong thing, they're going to do the wrong thing. And they're going to pay the consequences for doing the wrong thing. Just like you see people today who don't understand or know the Lord because their generations earlier decided that they were not going to follow God. And God, remember, gives people unto themselves. He will not force you to follow him. He will give you the option. Jesus died for you. You either accept it or you don't. And if you don't, no one feels bad for you. It breaks our heart as Christians because we share the message out of love and we want people to accept Christ, but we can't make them, and God won't make them either. If you go to hell, it's because you want to. Now, you don't think you want to, but if you reject God, you do want to. Because hell is separation from God.
And we've already seen, like with Cain and Abel, one son followed the Lord and one didn't. So you're wondering, where did these people come from that aren't of Jacob? They're from that. And then we see Esau. Esau is not following the Lord. So we have the Edomites. And so we have all these countries developing. We've seen choices already in Genesis of people who are like, no, I want no part of that. And they form their own nations.
And they form their own gods.
They form their own gods, and then they follow them. It's not that they didn't know God. They did. They came from Adam and Eve. They came from Noah. They did. They chose something different. And from that choice, we see nations develop following other gods. Just like, if you live in a Muslim country, you're going to be Muslim. Somewhere along the line, someone chose to worship another god. And then they are now paying the consequences of those choices. And it's terrible. And that's why our choices as parents matter. As grandparents, it matters because we have the ability to influence a younger generation and lead them in the ways of the Lord. And so, with Jacob, now his name is changed. So should the deception carry on in his family line? It shouldn't, because his name's been changed. It's not who he is anymore. And it's just like when you accept Christ, your name changes. You are now a Christian. You are of Christ. And so it should change you and your family and all that come after you.
If you're doing what you're supposed to.
And again, you may even have a child who's like, I've heard it, I don't want it, I'm rejecting it. It's a choice they made. It's not that they didn't know. And our job as parents is to lead them to Christ, to show them who Christ is. It's their job to accept Christ. But as the parent, you're leading them, and then it's their choice. That's one of the scariest things about being a parent. You cannot force them to do things. And so if they make that choice, that's then going to affect their family and their children from that point forward.
So we'll finish up. Jacob meets Esau. And Jacob lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, Esau was coming, and 400 men with him. So he divided the children among Leah and Rachel and the 2 female servants. And he put the servants with their children in front, then Leah and with her children, and Rachel and Joseph last of all. He himself went before them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times until he came near his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. Okay, so he did all that, and Esau was really excited to see him. Jacob showed him honor by bowing to the ground. And he also called him earlier, said, Lord. Remember, he spoke to him and said, had told his servants to say, Lord, these are the gifts I brought you. But it says, but Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him, and they wept. They cried together, knowing he forgave him. I'm sure Esau was crying, out of the forgiveness of his heart, and Jacob was crying because he was so glad he was being forgiven. And he's probably sorry about what he did.
But you also see in the order in which he sent people forward, change takes time. I mean, he just had an encounter with God, and first he sent the servants and their children, then Leah, then Rachel. He's going to save the favorite ones for the end. And so I think, in a way, though, I'm like, that's the Christian life. It's change. It takes time. It's a process that's not like you don't accept Christ and wake up the next day perfect. That would be nice. But if that was the case, we'd be in heaven. God would just remove us from this world because we don't need to be here anymore. But it takes time. But then at the same time, you see him bow down and repent and ask for forgiveness from his brother. So you see progress, but not completion. He's not done changing, but you see progress.
And we complain too.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in here gets tired of this world, don't you? And sometimes you're like, Lord, it'd be nice if you'd come back right now. And God's like, I'm not done with you. You still have sanctification to do. You still have to become more like Christ. And through our trials and difficulties, we become more like Christ. So what's our job? Stop complaining and allow God to change you from the inside out. Remember, we don't conform to the world as the world tries to press in on us and change us. We transform based on putting the Word of God and the Spirit of God in us, and He changes us from the inside out. And when you allow God to do that through reading of your Bible, praying, fellowship, all those things, right? The breaking of bread, as we're about to do, and then mainly being obedient to God and going through the trials that He puts in your life. The trials are what strengthens you and brings you to God and changes you. We hate trials, don't we? I mean, I don't like them. You can act like you're the perfect believer. I don't like trials. But I do know that trials bring me closer to God, and I do know it increases my trust in God. And I do know that God changes me in ways that I would not have changed by myself. I seek God in ways I would not have sought Him if I didn't have that trial. And so people think that God is evil and mean and all this stuff. And what He's actually doing is perfecting you. Fire cleanses silver and gold, doesn't it? And when it comes to the top, all the garbage, it gets scraped off and it's pure. And when God does the same thing to us, He puts us in fiery trials. And then when the garbage comes to the top, He scrapes it off and we're cleaner than we were before we started the trial. And He does that repetitively until the day you're perfected. When you meet Jesus, you'll be perfected. You won't sin anymore. Again, that's hard to believe because we know ourselves. But one day you will be perfect. Until then, God's still working on you. And it's His choice. He'll keep you here as long as He wants to. And you won't do anything about it. Except for keep fighting. Right? So there's no, oh, I'm done. No, you're not. If you're still here, you're not done because God is not done with you. And that's the beauty of it. He's God. We're His people. Yes, sir. I'll keep walking. Yes, Lord. Whatever you say, I'll do. So we will get prepared for communion. As we prepare for communion, same thing as last time. I want you guys to think about prayer requests. Think about things you may need to share or confess or whatever. Okay? Because the church is not silent. You don't just get to sit here the whole time and listen to me run my mouth. You have to share things. You have prayer requests. You have things on your heart. You may need to confess something. You may not. Let the Spirit of God guide you. All right?